In 1975, I met a person more infected with the radio bug than I. He was just all eaten up with it, had been for years. He got infected almost as early in life as I. Foster Brooks talks about his early days in radio.
In a studio rehearsal session, the singing voice of one of the top comedians of today, a man Louisville calls its own, a living legend to determination, Foster Brooks, in town for the Foster Brooks Corsair Crippled Children's Celebrity Golf Tournament. I asked Foster about his career, how it began.
I remember Mom saying, "By golly, I am just sick and tired of you sitting around the house and playing around here and just singing here at home when I think the world should be hearing you." You know?
She realized right off your talents.
Well, I don't know. A lot of mothers think that their child may have has talent, and in many cases, the child really doesn't have any talent. I mean, stage mothers they call them,
right.
You know, in California mostly, and so. But Mom just thought that I had a real nice voice, and it should be heard on radio. Well, I didn't give that a thought about hearing it on radio. My goodness, what, me singing on radio and all that, you know. So she called Mr. Platt up. "Brainerd, I just was sitting here, and my son Foster, you know Foster, well, he knew us all because they were very close friends, mother and dad, Mr. and Mrs. Platt, and I would like very much for him to be on radio." Well, that was in the days when if you could whistle, if you could do anything, make noise like animals or anything, they'd be very happy to have you come in and do it. Well, I didn't come up for an audition or anything like that. Mr. Platt called, I think, Mr. George Wiederhold, who was the program director at the time, and told him that Mrs. Brooks, who had already sung on WHAS, mother was one of the first, if not the first, soprano soloist ever on WHAS, and said she's bringing her son, Foster, up, and they would like to do a program. Well, it wound up where I did a program on which Mr. Billy Harrison, former mayor of the city of Louisville, spoke. And I don't know, I think a man by the name of George Latimer, who was a choir director for the Second Presbyterian Church at that time, which is no longer in existence, where St. X, right next door to where St. X used to be. St. X is not there anymore, is it? No, that college or high school, they tore that down and built a hotel there, I believe. But anyway, he played and I sang "You Are a Wonderful Mother," I remember that. And so it just, it didn't seem to bother me. It didn't make me nervous or anything to do
Right, and you were how old now?
13 years old.
You were 13 years old.
Yeah. It was, and there were times after that when Mr. Wiederhold would call Mother up and say, "When are you going to bring that boy in and give us a program?" And, I mean, they really needed things on the air. There weren't enough things to put on radio in those days.
Right.
And this was in the 20s, of course. And I recall one day Mother getting a call and said, "How about you bringing your boy in and giving us a 15-minute program at 8:45 Wednesday night? Because if you don't, we're going to have to sign off the station 15 minutes early." In those days, they signed the station off at 9 o'clock.
Right.
And so we went in, we came in, we did a 15-minute program. And Mother would sing, and I would sing, and Mother would sing, and I would sing, and all right. The program ended, and WHAS signed off the air at 9 o'clock. I recall, now people find this very hard to believe, but this was long before you were born, the Dempsey-Firpo fight. I heard it on a crystal set. I was lying across the bed in our 4-room house on 22nd Street, which later became a 7-room house, because Dad built some rooms on the top, had them built. But I was listening. My brother made this with wire wrapped around an oatmeal box. And no, my brother Ed, my older brother. And he made a crystal set. You got the pieces at the 10-cent store. No such thing as a 10-cent store anymore, but they were 10-cent stores then, and you got things for 10 cents and a nickel. And he put all the stuff around this mother's oatmeal box, and you slide some gadgets up and down on a rod that he hooked on there. Put the aerial up, a wire out to the post on the next door neighbor's barn, and then up to the house and down the side of the house, in through the window, and hook them up in these little things, stick them in there and screw them tight, and then start moving this little piece of wire around this crystal.
Listening in the earphones.
Listening in earphones.
Right.
And I was listening, and Dad, whom I think was the greatest man who ever lived on the face of this earth, was very anxious to know about the fight too, but he was the kind of a man who knew that I was enjoying listening to the fight, and wouldn't ask me for the earphones, so he could hear him. He said, "What's going on, doll?" He called all of us doll. For all our lives, he'd say, "Hiya, doll," and so he said, "What are they doing?" I said, "Furpo's down. He's up now." Oh, and Dad said, good. I said, "He's down." He said, good. Whip him, Jack, whip him. And then I said, "He's up, he's down again." And I did that about 4 times, and Dad said, "Oh, hon, come on now." He said, let me hear, let me have one of the things. So I said, "Here, you listen." And well, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Dempsey knocked Furpo down 7 times in the first or second round. I'm not too sure about that. But and then Furpo hit Dempsey, I believe. Was it Furpo who hit him and knocked him out of the ring in the press, as opposed to have pushed him back in the ring, which today would not be allowed,
Right.
And then Dempsey finally whipped him. During that fight, however, we didn't know how the fight came out, because
The station faded, or?
no, WHAS announcer, the name was a man by the name of Norman Sweet. He was the announcer. And he came on and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I am very sorry, but it is already 5 minutes after 9. And according to Federal Communications Commission rulings and regulations, this, that, and the other, we must sign off the air at 9 o'clock. We hate to interrupt, but we must sign off. This is WHAS, the Courier-Journal, Louisville Times, owned and operated by, and all that business."
And zap. We're speaking with Foster Brooks and the early days of his career.
I'd come up here in the morning and sit here out it was over at across on Liberty Street, and sit out in the lobby, which was about as big as this table, all day long, just hoping that I could see somebody like Mr. Eaton, or Pete Monroe, or somebody like that, somebody that we'd heard on radio, because in those days they didn't announce their names in radio. The announcer didn't say, "Your announcer is Jim Wilson."
There's just
Bitzer,
a friendly onstage announcer.
Yes, that's right. And the networks would do it. But I was getting a great thrill out of it. I was becoming known. I mean, "Hello, Foster, how are you?" And I think that's Joe. I think that's Mr. Eaton, And so eventually, my announcing my own program led me into, I think, substituting in the summertime on vacations, which was a tremendous thrill for me. And so that I had never seen a man come in and take a vacation job who wasn't kept on the staff. It just happened. I don't know why, but they kept him in the station some way or another. And so finally I got a job. And
was that with HAS?
WHAS, as an announcer when I was about 18 years old, I believe.
We're speaking this afternoon with Foster Brooks, and we're talking about early network program originations from WHAS.
Harry Curry and the orchestra had the program Greetings from Old Kentucky, and that was on about once a month, I think, and that was on the network. And Harry played the violin. He played, I think, almost every instrument in the orchestra, but he featured as a director, he featured himself on the violin, and the violin is right in the microphone. We had the old box camera microphones, and Sunday afternoon. I think this was on a Sunday afternoon. We're about to do this Greetings from Old Kentucky, and Davidson Taylor. They don't come any higher class than Davidson Taylor. He was an ordained minister only because I believe his parents asked him to become a minister, and they said, "You didn't ask me to." I think the story is, "You didn't ask me to go into a church. You just asked me to become a minister. I am a minister. Now I'm going to do this." He went on to be a vice president, still may be one of the vice presidents of CBS or NBC, but Davidson Taylor was the man who really was selected to announce programs with class, because he was class personified.
Right.
And so he was sitting at the microphone with a little gadget like this where he turns this thing on. Now, the first thing was, I'm trying to figure out if the orchestra went da da dum 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 da dum 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 dum, and hold that, while Davidson opened up the key and said, "Greetings from old Kentucky. Da da dum da dee da da dum da da dee da." Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, from the studios of WHAS in Louisville, Kentucky. We're about to bring you an hour of delightful music played for you by Harry Curry and so and so. Well, this particular afternoon, Harry and a fellow by the name of Bill Blanton, who was an engineer, had spent a little time at one of the local pubs. And Bill was the engineer on duty. And he was sitting out there kind of dreamy-eyed, and with his hands on the knobs. And the way it came out on the air, here's, how close you have to get to a microphone with this fiddle and the bow. That obviously would put your face close to it, too, you see. It turned out that just the moment before this very dignified, fine gentleman, Davidson Taylor, said, "Greetings from old Kentucky," just before he said greeting came like that. Well, and then he said, "Greetings from old Kentucky." Well, everybody in the world who heard it, excuse me, thought Davidson had belched just before, just before he said this, and it was killing him. I mean, he knew what people were thinking. My Lord above, what will they say, Well, the program went on. Harry didn't even know he belched, and Bill didn't, just laughed it off, and they did the whole program. But just at the end of the program, we had a little buzzer from where we were at the announce desk into the control, and from control into the announce desk. That was so light it could be buzzed while you were on the air and wouldn't go out on the air, see. And Blanton looked through the glass. He reached over and pressed the button, and Davidson is still red from neck up, for what Harry had done, and that made it sound as though he was the one who had done it. And Davidson picked up the phone and said, "Yes." And Bill said, Tell Harry to do that again at the end of the show, and we'll use it as a theme.
Foster, thank you.
Thank you so much. And very nice.